On tonight's No Things Considered, Steve Bannon is out. What do you think about that? Also, Vice wants to blow up Mount Rushmore and Antifa. Apparently they're violent. Did you guys know that? Let's talk about it. And here's your host. Well, it's me. Welcome to No Things Considered. We've got a lot to get to today, so let's not waste any time. First of all, Steve Bannon out at the White House. I thought the left was saying that he was the actual president and Donald Trump was his puppet. So that's odd that he's leaving, right? I guess who would be the puppet master now? I don't know. Either way, it's causing a stir on the right with Steve Bannon leaving. What do you guys think about it? Let's start the discussion right now in the comments section. You tell us what you think and argue amongst yourselves while things are going on here with the show. What do you think about Steve Bannon? Yesterday and today in Spain, a lot of awful terror attacks going on, and I just want to say no different than the terror that happened here on Saturday in Charlotte, guys. Terrorism is terrorism, whether it be coming from neo-Nazis or Nazis or ISIS. It's all awful. It's all violence. It's disgusting, and it's bad. And we're praying for everybody affected by that, and still with Charlotte. So let's get into funny stuff, shall we? This morning, Vice going a little bit farther with those Confederate statues and saying, "Hey, let's blow up Mount Rushmore." Yeah, that's right. They're just going to advocate for violence to blow up this national monument. Why not, right? Because it's white guys that own slaves. Time to eliminate everything. Actually, Vice retracted that. Put this full screen. They retracted it saying that they don't advocate violence. They changed the title to "Let's Get Rid of Mount Rushmore" instead. Now, that's very interesting because a lot of people didn't read into the article. And if you do, and we're going to keep this full screen, take a look at this, where the author, Wilbert Cooper, goes on to say that, hey, he was a fan, goes on to say that he was always skeptical of Martin Luther King. Why was he skeptical of Martin Luther King? Oh, because white people liked him too. And he was more in favor of Malcolm X, who wanted to cause turmoil and fight, rather than someone who wanted to bring everyone together. Interesting. I've never written off someone because a different race approved of them. So, I don't know what you think about that, but, let us know in the comments. That brings us to one of our favorite people, one of our favorite segments on the show. It's time for Maxine Waters' World. 1, 2, 3, 4! Maxine was meeting with a couple of constituents out in her district, and she went on with her normal rhetoric, as usual. Donald Trump, time to go. Let's listen to it.
While the president was defending the white nationalists and the KKK and all of those alt-right groups that were basically out there in Virginia.
He wasn't defending white nationalists. He, in fact, said that they were disgusting and shot them down many, many times, disavowed them, and disavowed David Duke. But hey, forget it, it's Maxine. She started talking about all the cabinet members that were standing with him and supporting these white nationalists. And it got interesting when she mentioned one in particular.
But this is what this cabinet looks like. Mm-hmm. Whether we talk about Mnuchin or Ben Carson, he's over a hub. He's got to come before my committee. If you think reclaiming my time that I did with Mnuchin, you wait till Ben Carson.
That's right. Former brain surgeon and now Secretary of HUD and African American. Ben Carson is a white supremacist, nationalist, whatever you want to call it, according to Maxine. She does not get better, does she? No. Jonah Goldberg penned an interesting article today in the New York Post. Put this full screen. Jonah Goldberg in the New York Post today said that fighting Nazis doesn't make Antifa the good guys, and the left seems to be catching on to this as well. Last night on Chris Matthews' show, he brought on Licia Brooks from the Southern Poverty Law Center to talk about it, and he had a lot of questions. She had some interesting answers.
What are they really? I know their name is Antifascists. Do they only go after fascists, or do they go after anybody, say, in the global economic community they don't like?
Now, here is what Licia said later in the interview. Now, here's what Licia said later in the interview. We're going to do some creative editing just for this point only, because this is what she should have said for the rest of the interview.
I couldn't say. I'm not an expert on Antifas.
Okay, well, that's very interesting, because she has a lot to say about Antifa before she gets to the point that she doesn't understand. So let's hear what she has to say about Antifa.
No, they are strictly principled anti-fascists. And what they see in the Trump administration and what they see happening in this country, they see the neo-fascism that we see. And they've taken a principled stand to stand against white supremacists and white nationalists wherever they may show up. I'd like to point out that Antifa at Charlottesville protected peaceful protesters. I don't know what President Trump was talking about.
Well, who were waving the clubs on that side?
That's right. As you can see there in that clip, Antifa's only protecting the peaceful protesters by fighting with people. But in case you're wondering if Antifa's principled and only standing against fascists, let's take it back a couple of months to remember Milo, when Milo went to speak at Berkeley and Antifa showed up. What did that look like exactly? They were peacefully protesting Milo, right? That's right, Antifa, the principled organization, full of peace and protection. We're there to protect somebody against Milo. Clearly, Milo himself was wielding an army of people fighting, right? No? Just him trying to speak at Berkeley? The interview continues.
I mean, I looked at pictures where people were jumping
themselves.
In. Well, there was one group that was jumping in and punching the Nazi types. I've seen pictures I've seen a lot of pictures like you have, and I've seen people reaching and then slugging them. Who were those people?
They may have been part of Antifa.
They may have been part of Antifa. See, here's the problem. Chris Matthews has eyes and ears and is a logical person. So he's watching videos of Antifa attacking people. And granted, the neo-Nazis, also terrible, were attacking Antifa. But there was no attempt at peace there. Come on. In fact, remember this video we showed yesterday of Antifa attacking just a random journalist?
We're here. We're gay. We fight the KKK. We're here.
I mean, I don't know if you're present for the whole like drug report. Stop filming, bro.
We're here.
Stop filming shit.
I can film whatever you want. Get out of here, bro. We're here.
How about that?
4 stitches to the back of an innocent journalist's head. That's peaceful, and that's just principled Antifa, right? Right. Chris Matthews has more questions, and Lisa Brooks from the Southern Poverty Law Center has more answers.
Antifa is not a nonviolent group, so let me just say that, and the Southern Poverty Law Center certainly prefers and promotes nonviolent protests. But I do want to point out that there's no moral equivalency between white supremacists, white nationalists,
I know.
and Antifa.
I'm with you.
We're all with you on that. White nationalists are bad, and we have to denounce them every day. I denounced them like 15 times this week. But did you notice her choice words? SPLC, the Southern Poverty Law Center, prefers nonviolent groups. They don't disavow violence. Seems like they're kind of cool with it. And that makes sense when you listen to her answers. But Chris Matthews, he pushes on.
Let me ask you about this use of the term fascist. I remember in grad school, way back in the 60s, I first heard somebody refer to a fascist as a business, anybody working in the administration at the time, anybody working for Johnson, anybody working in the government, any business person was a fascist. How loose a term is that for the Antifa people?
They're very serious about it. It's an
No, but I know they're serious subjectively, but how wide a sweep do they say fascist? Do they mean Mussolini people? Who do they mean?
No, I believe
anybody they don't like?
I believe that they're referring to anti-democracy and kind of a rabid nationalism that we see.
A rabid nationalism. See, I was raised to believe that America was #1 and we're the best at everything. Does that mean that the anti-fascists want to beat me up? Because I think America is awesome and #1. In fact, let's take a look at the definition of nationalism. Put it full screen just so people know. It's a patriotic feeling, principles, or efforts, an extreme form of this sometimes, especially marked by a feeling of superiority to other countries. If you're at the Olympics and you're cheering for, say, Michael Phelps, who's a great swimmer, and he's #1, and he's the best, and he represents America, does Antifa hate you? It kind of seems like it from that definition, this rabid nationalism. If you're waving American flags around, you know who else they probably hate? People who wear these hats, just in general, because you want to make America great again, because you think America is the greatest country in the world. Antifa, they're coming for you, and they've identified you as a fascist, because they just don't like you. Logical, and that's coming from the Southern Poverty Law Center. They have identified that anyone who is a nationalist and thinks America's #1, Antifa, is coming to get you. This interview keeps going.
I thought they're opposed to globalization as well.
I couldn't say. I'm not an expert on Antifa.
There it is. There's where she actually says it. See, Chris Matthews thought that Antifa was opposed to globalization. And when he says think, he means no. Because here's Antifa attacking everyone in the streets that they could get their hands on. at the G20 summit. But who pays attention to that? She doesn't know. She's not an expert on Antifa. She has no clue. She just knows that they hate people who love America. I mean, and white nationalists. I mean, everybody hates white nationalists and neo-Nazis, of course, but it seems like they just hate everybody who thinks America's number one.
Okay, let me go to Brian. Brian, let me ask you about Antifa. I mean, anti-fascist is a great word because we're against fascism. Is that what they mean? If that's what they mean, fine. If that's what they mean.
Yes. They do, but I'm going to diverge here.
Well, don't diverge yet. I want you to explain who Antifa is, because Trump's calling them the moral equivalent of neo-Nazis and KKK members. Put that in perspective. What is their method? What is their cause? Antifa.
What is their method? What is their cause? Well, I mean, the representative from SPLC just said that. Lisa Brooks, she just said they're against anybody who they identify as fascist, which could be anybody who thinks USA is number one. I'm going to keep hitting that because that's exactly what it is. Anybody who disagrees with them, they're after. This guy gets it, though.
There is no moral equivalency, and their cause is standing up to the bigotry and fascism that they see from white nationalists. And they are somewhat diverse. But as someone who had his life at risk and protected a Klansman from a mob of these folks, I can tell you that there is an offshoot that is violent and should be condemned.
See, there's no moral equivalency between somebody who hates someone because of their race and somebody who hates someone because of what they believe. Racism is worse than hating somebody just because whatever they believe or you disagree with them. True. But there is a moral equivalency of someone who wants to fight versus someone who wants to fight. And that's what he's saying there. Pretty logical, I think. Yeah, keeps going.
However, when we see these protests, most of the counter-protests are peaceful. Most of the Antifa people are peaceful. However, to be sure, there is a sliver that is violent and is looking to bash heads, and they should be condemned. But there's no moral equivalency between Nazis and white nationalists and a broad diversity of counter-protesters, which include a sliver of violent people.
And by the way, just for the fun of it, here's a sliver of those violent people trying to rip an American flag out of a guy's hand and then pepper spraying him. Antifa, the non-violent group. They are very non-violent. You can tell that they're non-violent. Oh my God. Let's continue to digress with Chris Matthews and his guests on MSNBC.
And Chris, let me also say, because I think it has to be said, that Antifa would not be there if it weren't for the white supremacists calling that
So
rally,
Antifa never goes to, Antifa doesn't engage in Occupy-type behavior against global meetings, for example, business leaders. They don't go after institutions that are not fascist.
They were in Charlottesville to stand against white supremacists.
In other examples.
But that's not what we're talking about, Chris.
No,
I mean,
I'm talking about this. I want to know who these people are.
So yeah, they showed up in Charlotte, Antifa, to fight Nazis, who are bad. And I have to say they are bad every clip that I do this in so that someone doesn't take a clip out of context and think that I am supportive of Nazis, which I am not. They're disgusting. But she's trying to say that they don't show up to other places and make excuses that they don't show up to other places to start fights. Hey, let's go back to the G20 again and see what happened in the streets of Germany when they tried to burn the city down. Totally peaceful group of people. They don't show up to just whatever. They only show up when white nationalists are there, right? You saw all the white nationalists in the streets at the G20. They were protesting taking down Confederate statues in Germany, right? That's what they were. No, they weren't there. Oh, and I guess we saw them too when they were protesting alongside Milo, because Milo brought an army of white nationalists with him to fight. No, they didn't do that at Berkeley either. Huh, and I guess they didn't threaten Berkeley again with more violence if Ann Coulter were to show up, right? Because no. I thought they only showed up when Nazis were there to stop fascism. Sounds like they're just showing up, like you said earlier, Miss Brooks, when they don't like what you have to say, or you think America's too great.
I couldn't say. I'm not an expert on Antifas.
I can't play that enough. What was that again? What do you actually know about Antifa?
I couldn't say. I'm not an expert on Antifas.
I love that clip because you're not an expert, but you have a lot to say with expertise on MSNBC with Chris Matthews about Antifa maybe being violent once in a while, but only being violent against fascists, but hating everyone who doesn't agree with them and calling everyone who doesn't agree with them fascist. Seems like we're putting a puzzle together here, right? The pieces are falling into place. Yeah, but that's, I guess, a false narrative, right?
I understand, but when you do that, you feed into the false narrative that
by trying to find out who everybody is? How does information work into a false narrative? I'm trying to get the truth here.
We gave you information about who they are and what they believe in.
Well, let's get the two issues here. Point of view. Obviously, Nazis are not equivalent to anybody else in terms of cause. They support racism and all the rest of it.
That's right. The SPLC gave Chris Matthews information, and the viewers of MSNBC the information on Antifa. And again, for the fifth time, I'm going to say this. Antifa is against fascism, but they define fascism loosely as anybody who thinks the USA is number one or is a nationalist. Not a white nationalist, just has nationalism. She clarified that earlier in her statements. Oh boy, we are in trouble. Sounds like these people want to just burn down everybody in America who thinks that we're number one.
I couldn't say. I'm not an expert on Antifas.
But you couldn't say because you're not an expert. Then why were you there to talk about them? I don't know anything about, Barbie dolls, so I don't go and talk on the news about Barbie dolls. I don't bring them on here. I do my research. Guess they'll let anybody on the news these days, huh? Jeez. Wow. Well, that's it for this night's No Things Considered. We're here every night of the week, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you want to see more breaking news and stories, scroll down on this very Facebook page. Go to dailycaller.com, dailycallerNewsFoundation.org. If you don't like Antifa or you have an opinion about them, put it in the comment section. Right here. Man, you guys, be kind to everybody over the weekend. Click the like button, click that heart button, click the smiley face button, and share this video if you liked it. I will see you Monday, episode 71. It's on Soccer.